The world of Cyberpunk and Night City has changed dramatically over the years, especially in the years between 2045 and 2077, where a massive rebuilding project took place in the city centre due to the events known as the Night City Holocaust that turned the whole city centre into an area called the Hot Zone. However, a lot isn't talked about what was going on within the early 2000s and the 2010s, and in fact during this period in time so many significant events took place that shaped the whole future of Night City and the world as well. We recently got the reveal and launch of Cyberpunk Legends, a brand new card game that focuses on some of the early events in the Cyberpunk timeline, like this blonde Johnny from back in the day. The game is approved by Mike himself and focuses on the year of 2012 in the heart of Night City, a period of time that is full of exciting pieces of lore and also events that shape the world for years on end. So without spoiling what happens within Legends, I thought we'd look into what is happening in Night City and the US in the early 2010s leading up to the events of the game to really set up what to expect when you open that first pack and play the scenario. I will say that this video is not at all sponsored by them. I have been shown the game, tested it, and have some of the assets to show off as well, but I really just want to explore the lore because I am excited to see what additional extras they have waiting for us when the game releases in 2026. So join me as we explore what is going on in the world of Cyberpunk and Night City in the early 2010s and in 2012, where Cyberpunk Legends is set. We start our timeline with one of the most significant events that was going on in the world at this point in time, and that was the Second Central American War. This war was ultimately one of the most corrupt wars out there, as it was just a way of the American government, or the Gang of Four, to control the narrative of what was going on, as they would frequently state that they were being threatened by drug cartels from the Central and Southern American countries, who were supposedly ruining the USA and corrupting it from the inside. In reality, the Gang of Four were just desperate to grab more land, and with it the Panama Canal, which was the whole trigger point for the First Central American War. During the second, however, a lot of new military tactics took place and new pieces of technology were developed to help try and win the war. For example, new AVs were developed that were to help the soldiers get into tight forests and woodlands to fight there. Ordinary planes could not pull off these maneuvers as the dense forest would have torn them up, and it forced the planes to fly high up in the air and the guerrilla fighters could take them out with ease. The AVs, however, were extremely small, were incredibly fast at pulling off maneuvers, and were armed for combat, making them the perfect form of transportation for this type of warfare. On top of that, there was a focus on new super soldiers being added to the field to be used as their own style of walking tank, and with it, corporations started researching new forms of cyberware. Before this point in time, cyberware was just advanced bits of prosthetics used for people harmed in warfare or within their workplace. It was crudely designed and was only fit for getting someone back on their feet. For example, one of the early forms of cyber arms did not have a hand on it. Instead, it was just a Lego man style of grip that could hold onto tools or a drink, and that's about it. However, now with these wars going on during this period in history, more corporations were investing in ways to make them more beneficial and effective in things like combat, enabling them to use weaponry effectively, whilst also having them be able to do things like close quarters combat and completely knock out their opponents. Thanks to this advancement in technology, the USA sent forward their first line of super soldiers that were heavily chromed up and were used to sweep areas like they were a tank on legs. They were incredibly efficient, however, despite their introduction into the war, the USA could not break through any of the Central American countries and their territory, mainly thanks to Europe supplying a lot of the Central American countries with equipment and tacticians to stop the US's advancements. And because of that, the US was forced into planning the end of the war. By 2010, this is exactly what happened, as the US government brought an end to the conflict and started the process of withdrawal. However, there was a catch, and a massive one at that. The Gang of Four had been ousted by this point in time, and because of it, a whole new wave of reforms started coming into play, which majorly affected all of the regular Joe soldiers fighting out there. Because before the war, they had been signed up as simple civilian contractors who did have skills, but the unemployment was so bad in the US at the time, they saw this as the only opportunity they had to earn earn money for their families. When the new Congress entered office, they would make severe cuts to the budget and took away most of the money available for the withdrawal of US soldiers and assets, and ultimately this led to the abandonment of all of the civilian contractors out in Panama and other US military bases. With that, millions of US civilians were stuck out in a country theirs had been at war with, and panic started to ensue. One high-ranking officer named Jonathan Mehta was furious at what had happened and felt betrayed by his own country, and with it led a ton of his ex-soldiers to steal expensive equipment from the military and use the funds from them, as well as his own assets, to create a new project that was to be named as Meta Key, its own international powerhouse that also became a part of the Nomad Nations. And a year later, the corporation of Metacorp was founded as well, which oddly was a corporation and a nomad family at the same time, but it officially became the largest nomad group in North America with 30,000 members by 2020. For those that didn't join MetaKey and join Metacorp, they would be forced to find their own way back to their home country with no help from anyone. This forced them into the nomad lifestyle as well, and a bitter hatred started for those who had led them to this abandonment. However, the government had different plans. They did not want the general public in the US to think of them as being the evil ones who left tons of their own to become homeless and die in another country, and so sent out media reports that these individuals had betrayed their own country and they had deserted the army and should not be welcomed back into the country because of it. Whether this was actually believed by the general population is hard to say. However, it was most likely believed by a lot of them, and that just fueled even more hatred for the government by the abandoned individuals. At this same time, the media was becoming ruled by a single entity, as Network 54 controlled over 62% of all media broadcasting in the US. If the government were to speak through N54 with their message, it would absolutely be able to spread this narrative that people were betraying their country and were rebelling against their role within the army. With that narrative being out on 62% of all news stations, it's most likely that after a while you'd start believing that that was a reality. For one individual, Robert Linder, he would be aware of how corrupt this war had become way before the events of 2010, and actually during his fight almost lost his life. But whilst lying with his arm blown off waiting for the final blow, his close friends stepped in and saved his life by sacrificing himself. Realizing that this was what the war had become and that these soldiers were being sent out to fight and die for a lie to help profit the many corporations at home as well as the government itself, Robert abandoned the army and left for Night City, where he would stay at the Hotel Pista Sofia for a whole month, replaying everything that had happened during that horrific war, something he joined at just the age of 16 years old. After that month, Robert got a new cybernetic silver arm and renamed himself as Johnny Silverhand and sought out a new life, desperately trying to shape the foundations of corporate America and spark others to rise up against their corrupt leaders, forming the band Samurai, performing together with Kerry Eurodyne, Denny, Nancy Hartley and Henry, where Johnny would play bass and do lead vocals. This band was massive and Johnny became a music icon all over the US, most significantly within Night City. However, the band had constant problems, and after a domestic incident happening with Nancy in 2008, where she was arrested for killing her abusive boyfriend, Samurai split up as none of them could work well together anymore. By 2010, however, Johnny was still a legend and continued on protesting all he could to make it clear to the wider population of Night City that corruption was still rampant in the streets, performing a benefit concert in Japantown to raise awareness of all of the brutal methods the NCPD were using on the homeless living in the city, because this was during one of the worst times of Night City's history, as they were currently under the rule of the mob, who only looked out for their own. Life wasn't easy in the rest of the US, however. Budget cuts were major and the US hadn't been the same since before the collapse. In 2010, massive food riots were happening throughout a lot of the country, but the worst of them were happening within Denver, Colorado, who had had enough of what had been going on, and the population there was just starving. Cyberpsychosis was also becoming far more of a problem during this period of time, most likely due to the jump from Gen 1 cyberware to this new form of it, and something needed to change because of it. A lot of new medications were brought in to help people with the installation of cyberware, but nothing was combating the rise in aggressive behavior, especially in those ex-soldiers with tons of military implants that were now taking over their brain processing. As a result of this, Night City stepped in and created the Night City Psycho Squad, thanks to the help of a once psychotic solo that went under the name of Ares. Ares knew what it meant to strip away his own humanity, as he had his whole body converted into full body plating, making him more of a Borg than anything human. After losing his mind and going on a full city rampage for a full week, the NCPD captured him alive during an insane gunfight where 30 NCPD officers and many civilians were killed in the process. Now with Ares in the NCPD's hands, they would completely alter his personality through controversial reconditioning techniques and made him the leader of this new squad to take out others that were like him, if not even worse. But at this point in time, not only had the Second Central American War come to an end, but the Second Corporate War also ended this year as SovOil eventually won the battle over Petrochem and took de facto control over the South China Sea, proving to many other corporations for the second time that private militaries could be used to great effect to grab more assets for themselves and bolster their status on the world. That said, it was revealed that the whole of the Second Corporate War was in fact triggered due to an accident that led to an explosion, and actually, neither of the warring parties were at fault, which was just an embarrassment on the world stage. For one group of individuals, however, they saw this new terrifying world as a good place to make some money, and for one man known as Nelson Katsadulas, who was a wealthy inheritor, he saw it as the perfect time to set up a new group that would be extremely skilled mercs who offered their services up for high-paying clients better than anything currently on the market. This group would eventually go on to be named as the Lazarus Group, and in 2010, they would be officially set up, as Nelson were going to hire experienced military experts to fulfill the role, as he had no experience himself. He was just the money at the end of the day. The first brought in was Emil Lazarus, who was the former colonel in the US Army Special Forces and had won a Medal of Honor. And with him on board, obviously being the main inspiration for the group's name, he went on to lead all of the operations. As a result, Nelson became a silent partner for this group, making Emil the face and name of the whole thing. And it didn't take long before their training facilities were fully built, where 5,000 trainees would be brought in and trained for 8 weeks, with some of the best in the industry teaching them all of their secrets and how to utilize the best equipment out there. After that, and throughout the 2010s, the Lazarus Group grew massively and extremely quickly, and with it got themselves involved in a ton of international conflicts where they would be the turning point for the winning side. Such wars like the Central African conflicts of 2013, the urban unrest of 2014, the Third Corporate War of 2016, and the European brushfire wars of 2018. They were a force to be reckoned with, but stayed in the shadows compared to their corporate competitors such as Arasaka and Militech. By 2011, a lot was changing out within Night City as the years of anarchy was starting to die down. The mob war that had officially started in 2009 had now come to an end, all thanks to the corporations wanting to take over Night City and make it their new hotspot. And to end the war, they would literally send in everything they had, from tanks, super soldiers, AVs and aerial bombardments, throwing everything physically possible at the mob to get rid of them once and for all, to take Night City for themselves and build it up as their new haven. As they moved in to claim what was actually once theirs back when the city's foundation began, the corporations started to completely restructure all of the Night City Council and made it so that every single corporation had a representative as part of it, so that everyone had a say on what was going on in the city. This also included a councillor from each individual district and any gang or smaller company who wanted to have a say in everything going on, to some extent anyway. But taking over things seemed to be the in thing during this year, because it was in 2011 when Metakey would be established, as all of Jonathan Meta's rebellious soldiers would take over an oil rig off the coast of New Mexico and set it up as their new base, setting up the whole foundation for their new society. Out in orbit, the Eurospace Agency had been working on a brand new project, that being the creation of a luxury space station that would house a ton of casinos, luxury bars and hotels, and a great holiday resort for high-paying customers. This would be the Crystal Palace, and by 2011 it had finally finished construction, costing the organisation over €7 billion, but giving them a permanent hold in Earth's orbit, helping them stand out as a real superpower down on Earth. Orbital Air would partner with the ESA to help maintain the orbital space station, and if Orbital Air were to leave them, it would ultimately see the complete demise of the Crystal Palace. Essentially, their contract had to be locked in key. One of the most notable creations during this year within Night City specifically was the new bar named the Forlorn Hope, created by John Freeman and William Dollarhide. After buying an old Victorian style building in Night City once known as the Hotel Sierra, the two individuals spent months turning it into something brand new and ultimately wanted this place to be a safe haven for all those veterans of the Second Central American War who had made it back to the US, most likely before the rest was stranded by their own government. A lot of the clientele that did venture to this location and call it their home away from home were actually solos, individuals who were seeking out merc work across the city, taking guidance from the best in the business, and the man who created the Solos manual, the top dog known as Morgan Blackhand, who by this point in time had been having a romantic relationship with Rogue Amendiares, although not many knew of this at the time. Solos and veterans weren't the only ones to venture to this place and make it their home, as it also included nomads, netrunners and fixers, and like how Afterlife is now in 2077, the Forlorn Hope was the place to be to make contacts and if you wanted to stand out as a legendary merc and solo in Night City, but it was also there to reflect on the Second Central American War and how much of a mental and physical toll it was on those that fought within it. 2012 started off terribly for one specific part of America, and that was within Chicago. Deep underground, this iconic city underneath the university located there was a facility that was kept extremely secret that was named as Heartland, that was there to design bioweapons and deadly diseases. This facility had been made by the federal government and was set up during World War II and really got to work during the early 1960s going into the Vietnam War. However, the facility became disused for a good few years after that, but instead of actually disposing of all of the bioweapons and plagues that were being created there, like Ebola viruses and other terrifying things, the government just sealed it off in the hope that no one ever found it. By 2011, Chicago was ready to rebuild after having a horrific time during the collapse, and one of the focuses was on the university. However, when this took place, the Heartland complex would be found, and despite all of the warning signs that were put up when the facility was abandoned, the construction crews demolished it without thought, which released absolutely all of the diseases into the air, which included the wasting plague, which had devastated the world back in 1999. The wasting plague was essentially a horrific disease which did not allow you to gain anything from food. You could eat and eat and eat, but your body could never process it, and you'd eventually starve to death even if you'd eaten 10 Sunday dinners in one day. With all of these diseases now in the air, people were dying in their droves, and the others were going into a mass panic. And within 6 months, going into the early months of 2012, Chicago became completely devastated once again, with a death toll of over 200,000 people. Some areas were still habitable and housed a lot of nomads, but the risk of being there was still too high. That said, it didn't stop the military from moving into the area and constructing a new port that would be used to launch new shipping operations on the Great Lakes. Those who were able to escape the area sought out nearby cities to live or became a part of nomad tribes who seemed to be growing year on year thanks to everything happening within the world. And speaking of the nomad tribes, the long walk from Panama and Central America officially came to an end. The long walk was essentially all of the abandoned soldiers heading back to their own country in the hope that when they got back there, they'd be able to return to their past lives. It was remembered as being the biggest nomad march ever seen in history, but the biggest tragedy of it was that only 10% of them made it back to US soil. The long walk officially killed more than the war itself, which was utterly devastating to learn, and something that the new nomads, who were just simple contractors once before, would never forget. Despite that horrific bit of news, the world was going through yet another technological breakthrough that would shape the world for years on end. Cyberware was becoming so much more of a common thing to have. However, it was still pretty much for the wealthy. In the years prior to 2012, many other experiments had been happening that were trying to move technology forward. Operation Green Man, for example, looked at cloning technology to create new humans that could adapt to harsher climates and could breed made on their own. Australia also looked at creating a nanotech device, and on the 13th of July 2011, Brian LeSean set a new record for the deepest independent suit dive utilizing the new Poseidon fluid breathing suit. Apart from the deep dive, the other two experiments, the nanotech device and the Green Man, were complete failures, with the nanotech device becoming utterly unstable, and as a result, both were shut down. However, in 2012, nanotechnology finally had its breakthrough and would be used within the medical field to help repair cells and also help the installation of new cyberware on the individual. The creation of nanotechnology was revolutionary and helped enhance the types of cyberware people could get, all thanks to how small these machines were and how they could access parts of the body that you couldn't before. This also allowed for the creation of brand new bioware to be installed on anyone who desired it, as well as for people who needed new things such as people with heart problems or faulty lungs. It was truly a new era for the people of the world. Not only could they get new limbs to help them in their day-to-day, but they could now enhance their internals as well, and if they had the money, could add things such as the ability to breathe underwater, increase their stamina to run faster, allow them to survive more toxic environments, so kind of following on from what the Green Man project was trying to achieve, as well as so many other things. In terms of helping those who had lost so much in the recent wars, it was a breath of fresh, clean air. However, it was more beneficial to the corporations creating it, as with new breakthroughs of technology came new bigger profits and opportunities to test it in new conflicts, especially as cyber weapons were becoming bigger and stronger now, with things like mantis blades being a common one to use for frontline warriors, especially for the megacorps. And speaking of megacorps, one of the big ones exploring this new wave of technology was Arasaka, and during this point in 2012, rumors had been spreading around all over Night City that they had been developing a new piece of technology that they hoped would turn into the biggest product on the market. Supposedly, they had started working on their own form of engram technology that could preserve human consciousness, memories, skills, reflexes, and many other things on a single piece of cyberware. This whole concept wasn't speculation, it was in fact true, as it had been public knowledge, or at least corporate knowledge for a good while. But Arasaka clearly must have felt like they were the ones who were going to make it big and sell it internationally as the next type of groundbreaking cyberware. The vague reports indicate that this wasn't designed as a weapon like that of Soulkiller later in their history. Instead, this technology was said to allow individuals to learn skills and gain new reflexes within a second, all thanks to the power of some brand new cyberware. You want to learn how to be a black belt in karate? Well, this piece of cyberware has the memory of a karate legend on it, and inserting it into yourself will mean you too will have their knowledge and abilities. You want to run fast like an Olympian? Well, these cyberware legs have the skills of Usain Bolt in them, and suddenly you can run 100 meters in just 9.58 seconds. Legs of a ballerina, eyes of a sniper, this could all be yours thanks to Arasaka's rumored new prototypes. It was supposed to be a new wave of cyberware, ones that gave you not just a physical change, but a mental one as well, with brand new reflexes and all. At least, that was the plan during this point in history anyway. It was said that this was not as good as it sounds, however, and unfortunately for the mega corporation, this technology was said to be failing on them badly, because no one could figure out how you could implant a human consciousness onto a limb or piece of body. How do you trap a human onto some lungs, for example? And because of it, the cyberware would go insane, and with it, so too would the human it was attached to, now turning them into a cyber psycho, raising the numbers of cyber psychos in the country and giving MaxTac more stuff to think about and deal with. Then again, it's most likely, if this is at all true, that they kept it all behind Arasaka's closed doors to make sure it was not revealed to the mass populace, especially as it was suggested that the people that were having this cyberware tested on them weren't actually volunteers. Instead, they were homeless people that had been grabbed by Arasaka through a mysterious church named the Night Church. You see, the Night Church was rumored to be an Arasaka front, and the stories say that during the height of homelessness in Night City, this church would advertise itself as a safe haven for them, and when they sought solace here in this what was believed to be a friendly place, they would then be nabbed by Arasaka forces and taken to their labs, as they knew full well that no one would miss these homeless individuals. As this rumor or conspiracy grew about what this technology was that they were exploring, there was another major problem to all of this, and that was that Arasaka had spent a fortune on this technology. It needed it to work because if it failed, their whole corporation's reputation would be on the line and heads would roll. This meant action needed to take place, and with it, Toshiro Harade, one of the top dogs at Arasaka, was said to have set out on a mission to get it working and ready to put out into the world. During this time, he was rumored to have found out that there was another corporation working on a similar technology, and with it was one individual who had found a way to get a very similar tech working. And not only that, but it was absolutely miles ahead of what Arasaka had been doing. Toshiro knew that trying to employ this individual would not be possible. The corporation would not just let her go, and so it was said that he had to come up with a new plan, and that was simply to capture her and grab all of the information for themselves, and with it, get Arasaka in front of the competition. This individual would of course be named Alt Cunningham. Up until this point, Alt had been renowned for her incredible netrunning skills and was actually seen as one of, if not the most powerful netrunners in all of Night City, if not the world. Spending years in the netrunning and programming industry, Alt was wanted by everyone and made an absolute fortune in her work, so much so that she upgraded and enhanced her body to make herself more beautiful, utilizing the best European body sculptors out there. With it, she would also buy the best neural processors and interface plugs out there to navigate the net whenever, as well as a golden cyber arm which had a hidden compartment specifically designed so she could hold a Federate Arms X-22 pistol. After years of running the net with the iconic hacker and the man responsible for destroying the whole old net in the 2020s, Raish Bartmoss, Alt finally started putting her incredible programming skills to use in what was only labelled as a mysterious ITS corporation where, as mentioned, she would be looking at making a revolutionary human AI transfer program, which was a true game changer and caught the eyes of many third parties who found out what she was working on. At this point in time, she had also formed an on and off relationship with legendary rocker boy Johnny Silverhand, who thought the world of her, but also mistreated her a lot, leading to irregular heated arguments as well as breakups. That would of course all lead to the events of 2013, where Alt Cunningham would be grabbed by Arasaka forces and utilized by Toshiro in the Soul Killer project in the events of Never Fade Away, a story we will fully explore at a later date. Thus, for the events leading up to 2012, there is still so much to explore, especially when it comes to those final moments before Alt's capture. Whilst the 2010s are sometimes overlooked, it's fair to say that these years were massive in shaping the whole of how the US is now, and also how it helped develop new technology. Without the nanotech discovery in 2012, there would be no BioWare. Without the US government turning their backs on their own citizens out in Panama and the other Central American countries, there wouldn't probably be nearly as many nomad communities, and things like MetaKey would absolutely not exist. Johnny Silverhand might not have been who he is today. He might have continued on fighting for his country if things were different, and let's not forget about the rumoured stories of what Arasaka were up to in 2012 and what would have happened if they got them right. There's so much to learn about how the world and Night City got to where it is today, and the early 2010s were in fact devastating times for many out there. But then again, this is Cyberpunk. And no matter what year you choose to look at, you know full well that someone is going to have a very unhappy ending. But for now, this has been the lore behind the early 2010s and where the world is now in the year of 2012, where the events of Cyberpunk Legends takes place. And hopefully soon we will learn more about what happened in this year and how it led into the events of Never Fade Away. I want to say a big thanks for watching this video again and for supporting this channel, including my patrons such as my small fishes, my YouTube channel Wise Ones, Video Gamer 75, Sith Lord 906, Planet Nanotarium, V3XXE, and Ethan Feldman, my big fishes Ben Chance, This Mind of Mine, and Anthony Bonfiglio, my shark Dan F, my Megalodons, Hazy Thoughts and Sinus, and my incredible starfish Nanohertz. A big thanks to Night Crew Games for also allowing me to show off some of their new artwork for Cyberpunk Legends, as well as give me a brief bit about their lore. I've got so many more videos planned that are based around the lore of their game coming really soon, so check out their website and Discord to stay up to date on what they're doing, and check out their Kickstarter to get your pack today if it interests you at all. Honestly, the artwork is worth buying it for, it's so good. And please do give this video a like and leave a nice comment if you did enjoy it at any point, and with that said, I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.